This is Around the Town, and I'm your co-host, Tom Byrne.
And I'm Barbara Byrne, and today our guest is Bob Emerick, a Rutland police officer. Tell us something about yourself, Bob.
Well, Barb, I've been an officer in the city of Rutland for approximately 5 years. Prior to that, I was with the County Sheriff's Department. I've been with the United States Department of Labor as an investigator. I've also been with the New York County District Attorney's Office. Also been involved with Sherburne Corporation at Killington. And prior to that, in my military career and subsequent to that, I have been a career railroader with a number of carriers throughout the East. Sideline, I'm still involved in the railroad business on a part-time basis. With my brother, we have a consulting firm.
Mm-hmm.
The railroading goes way back in your family, then.
About 600 years, Tom. Back to great-grandparents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, my father, my brother, myself, and a number of members of our family, ranging from freight agent all the way on down to bridge watchman.
Tell us something about what you did in the New Jersey area.
Okay, while I was in New Jersey, I was with the old Lackawanna Railroad during college days. I worked a variety of jobs there in freight yards. I was with the Erie Railroad, again in college days, and the Reading Company, which is a traditional Philadelphia railroad. My last career with the railroad industry with a major carrier was with the Central Railroad of New Jersey. I was in charge of the what we call intermodal, which is trailer and flat car container service. We developed a facility called Portside Terminal, which to this very day is the most modern container handling facility on the East Coast. I've been involved with several tourist railroads. I'm a qualified steam locomotive engineer, and I've been involved with a number of groups. We've operated several lengthy locomotive trips, one-day trips. We operated an 18-day extravaganza to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the Golden Spike in Salt Lake City, Utah. Well, let's see, I can even go. We've even had one of the locomotives released featured on Tom Snyder's Tomorrow Show a number of years ago. I've currently been involved, as I mentioned, my brother and two other fellows and I have our own consulting firm. We organized and operated a number of short line railroads in the New Jersey and New York metropolitan area.
Are there any steamers left in the United States
Well,
still in operation?
There are a number of steam locomotives, although not in actual what we call common carrier service. One of the most famous operations is the Strasburg Railroad out in Pennsylvania, Dutch country. The Denver and Rio Grande Western out in Durango, Colorado. Just to name two. The Black River and Western in New Jersey, and the New Hope and Ivyland in Pennsylvania, which I was very much involved with. And of course, railroads such as the Norfolk Southern Railway, the Canadian roads, they operate a number of steam-powered trips. The Southern Railway has got a reputation of using it as a public relations tool. And of course, the Norfolk Southern's corporate history and financial success are well known throughout the financial world.
They seem to have survived the slaughter of American railroads very well.
Well, they've not only survived, but they've prospered, and hopefully, and of course it depends, the basic principle that the Norfolk Southern has established is the same that closer to home Guilford Industries has gotten into. They've taken a bankrupt railroad, notably the Boston and Maine. They've applied sound business practices, turned the thing around, and it's making money as is Conrail. I think the day of the area where you've got 16 or 17 independent large carriers is over. You've got to have regional railroads, plus your short lines as feeders.
Mm-hmm. I think deregulation has had its effect on the trucking industry, too.
And I've seen it myself in plain language. The railroads have been able to knock the socks off the truckers with some of these new attractive rates they've been able to pay.
Right. Could you tell us something about the connection between Theodore Roosevelt and a grade crossing?
Most people think with grade crossing accidents that it's just something new with the cars. Well, the earliest recorded grade crossing accident was back in 1853. And the cause of the accident was the fact that the carriage driver just didn't look. In 1902, not too far from here in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, President Theodore Roosevelt, Governor John Crane of Massachusetts, and a party of notables were proceeding from Pittsfield out to the country club for a reception. It was one of these fancy, handsome, open landau carriages drawn by 4 prancing white horses with the usual retinue of people following along. Just outside of the town of Pittsfield, Massachusetts, the electric railroad crossed the road at grade. The driver of the carriage paid absolutely no attention, turned across the crossing, and as a result, the carriage was struck by a trolley car. The Secret Service agent jumped up to protect President Roosevelt and was killed. The President and Governor Crane were thrown out onto the ground. President Roosevelt suffered a number of bruises. His frock coat was torn, and of course, as he referred to it, as the biggest outrage he ever saw. Had Roosevelt not been protected by the Secret Service agent, had Roosevelt been killed, the entire course of this nation's history would have been changed. Because if you recall, Roosevelt had acceded to the presidency a few months before because President McKinley had been murdered. There was no vice president, and consequently the Secretary of State, John I. Hay, a well-known pacifist and mollycoddle, as Roosevelt called him, would have become the President of the United States. And gosh knows what would have happened from that.
So it was a problem in those days, as it is today.
It's gotten worse.
Did President Roosevelt do something about train crossings at the time?
Unfortunately, no. What they succeeded in doing, it was an interesting story. There was a lot of bad press, and of course President Roosevelt was very popular at the time.
Yes.
And they attempted to, and they did in fact, blame the electric train operator for the crossing accident, despite the fact that the carriage crossed right in front. There was sufficient warning devices, and the driver later admitted he wasn't paying attention, so everything came out in the wash, so to speak, a little later. But that was prior to America's really falling in love with the automobile.
And what has happened to grade crossings since then?
Since that time, we have approximately 6,200 to 6,300 grade crossing accidents a year in this country. The majority of which, believe it or not, happen at crossings that are protected with some warning device.
You mean people just go right through the
Absolutely.
gates or whatever?
They'll go around the gates.
Ignore the lights?
They'll go around the gates. They'll go across in front of trains. It seems to be a big joke. Right here in Rutland City, you can sit at any one of the major crossings we have here, in fact, any one of the crossings, and you will see motorists totally and flagrantly disregarding it. Propane trucks, fuel oil trucks, buses, particularly charter buses, totally ignoring the railroad crossing signs.
Tank car loaded with propane hit by a compact car, what do you think would happen?
It would what I refer to as Hiroshima revisited. We used to call them the railroad rolling bombs. The damage to the citizenry, the damage to the area, and very important, of course, is even if the car doesn't explode, the damage to the environment. It's something that people just don't seem to understand. They don't pay attention. They are totally unaware. For example, the famous expression, I didn't hear it, I didn't see it, I didn't want to wait for the train, I was late for work, oh, they only go at 5 miles an hour. These are the classic things that people say to you when you stop on a railroad crossing violation. They're the very same individual who wouldn't think of getting in their car without hooking up a seatbelt, getting a child restraint seat for their child, making sure that it's proper, not even touching a drink when they drive, is the very same person that will see the flashing red lights and just go right across without looking.
Ignore them completely.
Completely. We've just finished a videotape made right here locally. It's not Hollywood, but you can see they completely disregard and go right across.
Of all the railroad crossing accidents that occur, how many times does the locomotive strike the cars?
Believe it or not that often. I mean, a good percentage of the accidents are caused by people running into the train. For example, right here in Rutland, about approximately 2 years ago, the Delaware and Hudson sold the track between Rutland and Whitehall of the Clarendon and Pittsford Railroad, which is a subsidiary of the Vermont Railway. one of the last days that the D&H ran into Rutland, there was a grade crossing accident right out here on Forest Street. The motorist ran into the train. 3 weeks ago, there was a tragic loss of life in Virginia. A busload of churchgoers ran into the 11th car of a train. The bus driver made no attempt to stop. And trains don't jump off tracks and chase cars. It's just the fact that people don't pay attention.
Before we came on the air, I mentioned that my sister-in-law's mother was killed at the grade crossing over in Fairhaven. Well, the reason that occurred is it was in the, I believe, late spring, and in an attempt to stop, there was ice on the road, and they skidded right into the freight train.
This is an unfortunate that the accident occurs, but fortunately this is a very, very rare exception. In fact, yesterday I have a co-speaker I work with on Operation Lifesaver. The gentleman's an engineer from the Vermont Railway. We were up conducting a class for the Otter Valley Union High School school bus drivers. And one of the drivers in the discussion session we had after advised me was talking about a grade crossing there is up in Florence. It's at the bottom of a hill in both directions. And that it could sometimes be a dangerous crossing, but very fortunately the town of Florence is aware of this, and they heavily sand that crossing. And the only way they mention a hazard up at the crossing, that there was something blocking vision, while corrective steps have been taken to remove that obstacle. It's a combination type of thing. This, our education phase, Lifesaver runs in what we call the 3 E's. It's education, engineering, and enforcement. And the education phase, I feel, at the present time is the most important.
Well, Bob, in talking with you, I can see that you're not only well qualified to talk about railroads, but you seem to be a dedicated person, dedicated for rail safety and for the safety of the highway passengers as well. What is the name of your group?
Okay, the Operation Lifesaver program is a nationally organized railroad highway safety program. Each state has their own group. In our particular case in Vermont, there is a young lady named Lisa Coda, who is the state coordinator. She is with the Vermont Railway. And through Lisa and through a number of other individuals, we have an educational program. We have speaking teams that go around to various areas. We conduct classes, we show films, we have discussions. As you've got in front, we have various graphics that we give people. Mm-hmm. Everybody likes handouts. Right. And we have little windshield stickers that go on and serve to be little reminders like seat belts. The brochure we have here, this Operation Lifesaver brochure, tells you a little bit about the program, and it explains the Vermont law basically as far as railroad crossings are concerned.
What age groups do you start with, Bob?
Well, we start as young as kindergarten. We recently did school district over here in the western part of the county from kindergarten to 12. We had 6 separate presentations based upon the age group. The unique thing about this Operation Lifesaver program is you can tailor your presentation to age group, time constraints, areas. We've got various handouts. We have coloring books for the kiddies. We have locomotive pictures, which, strangely believe it, every age group likes them. We've got these bumper stickers. We've got dashboard stickers. Again, I mentioned we have this little self-test. It's called Can You Make the Grade? It asks various questions about how long does it take to stop a train. We just finished with our videotape. We're going to title that very shortly. I'm going to pilot it up at the VOTEC on Friday with our public safety class. The education phase, we go through graphics, and again, if I may, some of these graphics aren't exactly the prettiest, but when you show somebody a picture of a locomotive on its side or a car in 25 or 30 pieces, it does have a tendency to make people stop to think. And this is what we want people to do, is people just don't pay attention. And they are the prime cause of these unfortunate accidents.
It seems to me that people feel that there is no longer a railroad industry. And
Unfortunately.
because they don't see trains very often. They don't see passenger trains hardly ever. And the average person is not that familiar with the freight operation, even when the railroads were in their prime. I can see a person looking up at the sky and watching a commercial airliner forgetting about the train at the crossing, because all we see today in front of us and the news media and advertising is flying. So it's in the forefront of everything, and the railroad industry is forgotten, but it's still there.
You hit the nail on the head. I've had people say, one guy said to me in particular, he says, "Gee, isn't it too bad we don't have the railroads here anymore?" And I looked at the guy as the gas train is coming in from Whitehall. And the gentleman said, I said, "Well, what do you call that?" And I said, "You got a GP38 with 27 cars of gasoline on there, plus the coal train coming." "Oh, I mean the passenger trains." But this is the unfortunate thing. People don't realize right here in Rutland, there are a fairly large amount of train movements. What you've got is you've got two separate operations. You've got the Green Mountain Railroad comes in every day from Bellows Falls. You've got the Clarendon and Pittsburgh train that goes up to Florence every day. You've got the Clarendon and Pittsburgh train that goes to Whitehall every day. And then the Vermont Railway has the train that comes in and out from Burlington and goes to Bennington. They have another one to and from North Bennington, not counting the yard switching movements. And people don't realize this. There are quite a bit of train movements around here.
So, do you know how many grade crossings there are in the Rutland area, for example?
Let's see. I can tell you where they are, but I got to stop and think. You've got about a dozen grade crossings in Rutland.
So you have a dozen grade
Roughly.
Crossings in 3 trains a day.
You've got. There's a differentiation between the number of actual trains that come in and number of train movements.
Mm-hmm.
And for example, you may have one train, which would be the morning yard drill. He may cross back and forth across Park Street or South Main Street, crossing 10 times during the course of his job. So there is a differentiation between trains and train movements.
Right.
Fortunately, in the city of Rutland, we've only got 3 unprotected grade crossings. I mean, as far as unprotected without lights and or flashers or gates. We are also unique in the city of Rutland as there are 3 railroad crossings in the state of Vermont that are protected by both traffic lights and flashers, and 2 of the 3 are in Rutland. And believe it or not, of all the traffic tickets I have written, one of those crossings is the one I've written the most traffic. It's a double violation. They ignore the railroad crossing signal, and most also they ignore the red light.
Bob, can you tell us the Vermont regulations on train crossings?
The Vermont Traffic Code is entitled what they call Title 23. And there are 2 specific sections of Title 23, 1071 and 1072. 1071 is entitled Railroad Grade Crossings. And it specifically states that a driver must stop within so many feet of a grade crossing when a gate is being lowered, there is an electrical, or as they say, mechanical signal device, there is a train approaching within so many feet, sounding an air horn. A train is visible and hazardous. It also states that you will not drive around a crossing gate while it is coming down, going up, or while it is down. But there is a disclaimer in there. For example, if you come up to a grade crossing where there is flashing red lights only, and you look down the tracks and the train is a very, very safe distance, the air horn is not sounding, you can safely go across. You can proceed. However, at the crossing out here we call Temple Crossing out by the used car dealership, or at the one in South Main Street, there's a red light there. You don't go.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, the other section involves that the driver of any car carrying any person for hire, school bus, charter bus, scheduled bus, or any hazardous materials, gasoline, propane, or whatnot, you must come to a full and complete stop before you go across. The we've been very fortunate again here. The school districts here, they train their drivers well. Vermont Transit, you couldn't ask for a better group. They're very professional drivers, and they're all super careful of what they do. And I think it's a compliment to them and to their company, quite frankly.
Tell us how long it would take a freight locomotive with, say, pulling a half a dozen loaded boxcars to stop at a railroad crossing in the event the car was on the crossing. Say maybe the locomotive was doing about 15 miles an hour.
All right, without a specific footage, not soon enough. A train, for example, back in the early spring, there's a crossing just south of Manchester. The train was coming northbound, doing about 25 to 30 miles an hour. This car pulls up at a crossing where there was a stop sign as well as a crossing warning. She pulls right across in front of the engine. Half a mile down the road, they were just stopping the train. Fortunately, the operator of the motor vehicle wasn't hurt. And one of the first questions was asked to the engineers, why didn't you steer out of the way? And that is a fact. We've brought people up in the engine, and I've got to say this at this point, the Vermont Railway and all the other rail carriers in the state have been very good as far as letting me bring people down, look at things, and see what it's like. And I think they deserve. The railroad industry has been very much maligned by the general public in years past and by the press. And I think this forum, as narrow as it is, I think they should be given a little bit of a boost. This program, yes, does benefit the railroads, but it saves lives. And the Vermont Railway Association has been very active in it, which I'm sorry to get a little far afield. You'll find people that ask, why don't you steer out of the way? Where's your gas pedal? Where's your brake pedal? And they're totally unaware of what goes on up there.
Seeing a diesel locomotive weighs how many tons?
You can run anywhere from 44 tons up to almost 200 tons. For example, here on the Vermont Railway, your lightest engine weighs 125 tons. So you're talking, there isn't an automobile made today that can withstand 125 tons of direct pressure.
So a 250,000-pound vehicle moving 10 miles an hour isn't going to stop
Absolutely
very
not.
fast.
No.
Right.
And it depends. Trespassers, it's the same thing. And on that little video, I was riding over doing some video on the coal train last week. And here comes this fellow across the bridge at East Creek. He's got his hands in his pockets, his head down like that. The engineer's blowing the air horn, blowing the air, and the guy looks up and he goes back down again. He's wandering on his way to work.
And children also playing along the railroad tracks are a hazard on...
We have a problem. We've been starting a collection of articles that have been hit by the train that kids have placed on the tracks. It's becoming a real problem. And again, we have another movie entitled Trespass that we sell. It is not a very pretty movie. And it all involves kids. But people, unfortunately, just don't understand. And this is why I said is the education phase of Operation Lifesaver is, in my opinion, one of the most important.
Well, I guess we can say that one message that should go out to the public is that the railroads are still with us.
Absolutely.
They're still operating.
They're here to stay.
They're still rolling across this track, and they're still crossing grade crossings. And if there's a dozen crossings in the area, there could be potentially 50 possibilities in the course of a day right in the Rutland area where someone could run into a train or a train be hit by a train.
I think you hit the nail on the head. I'd like to touch basically the other two phases of the program are engineering, which is a cooperative effort between federal, state, and local governments and the railroads to utilize a lot of this money to improve grade crossings. The state of Vermont installed signals and lights on 84 grade crossings last year. And they did track improvements on another 80. And considering the fact that we've got almost 600 grade crossings, that's a pretty good average.
But that isn't going to do any good
No.
if the people continue to ignore the signals.
That's just it. And again, that's where your third E comes in, enforcement. One of the things in the program we also do is we run classes. The ironic, unique thing is the instructor in the accident investigation and part of the enforcement phase is a gentleman named Glenn Davis. He is president of the Green Mountain Railroad. He is also a retired deputy commander of the Vermont State Police, which puts Glenn in a unique position. He's well-versed, and again, the enforcement section of it is basically our end of it, but I would again touch, and I appreciate the use of this forum from both you folks, is educating the general public. If they stopped at these grade crossings, the accidents would be practically nothing.
If they would just listen and understand that it's a dangerous situation.
That's exactly it.
From what you said, the children are being educated in the schools.
Absolutely.
And what the parents should do is listen to what their children have to say about the subject.
When they come home after they've seen one of your lectures, their parents should listen to them.
Some of them do, and unfortunately some of them don't.
Do you ask the children to pass on this education to their parents?
Absolutely. And it's one of the things, like, you give a little bumper sticker out, a little dashboard sticker out like this, and Mommy, put it on the car, Daddy, put it on the car, so to keep the kids quiet, they do it. But then it's there for them to see.
Yeah.
So this is what...
It helps that much anyway, if they'll just heed the message.
That's all we ask.
Is there anything the folks looking in can do to give this program a boost?
Tell their friends about it, number one. Number two is, we do have a speaking team. I can be reached through the Rutland City Police Department at 773-1816. We are very willing to come out. We will talk days, nights, give a presentation. It doesn't have to be a club or organization. If you have a group of your neighbors, we'll come out and we'll give you a presentation. And we'll make arrangements for you to, at your convenience, within your time constraints, and whatever type of presentation you want. That's all we ask, and we're more than willing, and we're asking everybody's support.
Your presentation consists of more than speaking, then?
Yes, we have films, handouts, and we found the most successful thing toward the end is what we call a bull session.
You don't restrict yourself to schools.
No.
You go to any organization that will
anybody that's interested.
Invite you.
No charge, and we will travel. As I said, we have traveled. In fact, we are scheduled to go down to the southern end of the state very shortly.
If the program continues to operate as it has been in the past, do you see any favorable results?
Yes, I do. And I think each year we're going to find that it's going to be a little more, it's going to be a little more on the positive side. Even if we save one accident, it's a success as far as I'm concerned.
That's true.
Yes.
Life is too cheap, it's too precious to set a price on it.
Yes.
Seems to me, Tom, you could give a separate talk on your railroad experiences. Have you ever done that?
Yes, I have on a number of bases. As I mentioned, that we have I'm as much into railroading as I am into this Operation Lifesaver program in my law enforcement career. And we had done a number of shows. We've done Tom Snyder, was NBC's Tonight Show for a number of years. Correction, Tomorrow Show. I'm thinking of Johnny Carson. But, no, the railroading industry is one, and whether you do it as a profession, a hobby, or which I do it as both, it's one that's unique.
Well, Tom, I want to thank you very much for coming down to talk to us today, and we hope you can come down and see us again soon.
And I appreciate the opportunity.